Hi, and welcome to another episode of A Mason's Work podcast. I'm here with worshipful brother Michael LaRocco. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
So as we are wont to do in all of the podcasts here on A Mason's Work, we're interested in your practical experiences in Freemasonry. How has the craft informed your kind of understanding of behavior and maybe your trajectory? So, if you could kind of give our listeners a little bit of a short intro, that will help. I'm familiar with the work because I watched a couple of live feeds out of Craftsman Online podcast and just love what I saw. So if you could help our viewers / listeners a little bit, that'll get us started.
Yeah. So I had a lot of experiences when I was younger with tragedy. And so I kind of always was forced into being a deep thinker to try to figure things out and try to explain or to try to figure out how, to get through what I needed to get through. I had a few years before Masonry, an extraordinary shift in awareness, an enlightenment experience. And I started drawn to Freemasonry when I was just going online. Back then, probably like when you type in Freemasonry on the internet, probably about 85 to 90% of everything that was online was negative. All the conspiracy theories, the crazy outlandish stuff. But I started to wade through it, and I stumbled upon some information and a lot of podcasts. Really like articles and stuff that were drawn from a lot of the older Masonic scholars like Manly P. Hall, Albert Pike, Mackey. And then I stumbled upon something that kind of like arrived at the statement that Freemasonry was a Western and in some cases an American path to enlightenment. Wow. I was really into Enlightenment. I was studying Hinduism and Buddhism for many, many years. Mysticism, a little bit of Kabbalah at the time. When I found that out, I wanted to pursue it. So I had a friend that was a Mason. I talked to him, introduced me to the secretary, and when I joined, I must say that I didn't recognize the profound depth of the first 3 degrees until I started going to the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. And there, it opened my eyes, and the scales, so to speak, fell from my eyes. And the more involved I am in what they used to call the higher degrees, the more I see how deep and how profound the first 3 degrees really, really are. And it just, keeps getting deeper and deeper. And so I started to recognize the similarities of what I was learning on what the path of enlightenment was, symbols in Freemasonry. And that's when it clicked for me that this is where I want to be, and this is where I need to do my work. And I found then, and I found now, that Freemasonry is the place for me where I literally can use all of me to serve my higher purpose, to serve God, to serve my fellow men, and to use all my talents to feel perfect.
So what about Freemasonry gives you that kind of sort of full exposure, if you will? What specifically would you attribute that expression to?
I would say that Freemasonry gives me the ability to interact with brothers from all parts of the world, all countries, all cultures, so many different philosophies, and but I think it's unique in respect that we treat each other as brothers. We're all initiates and open-minded. And so we all hold fast to our religious beliefs on our philosophies and ideologies, but we're open-minded and we treat each other respectfully. We listen. I think that there's this open-mindedness. I have found a lot of depth in a lot of other traditions that I've stumbled upon, religious, philosophical. Something unique about Freemasonry, about its age and its size, allowing men from, to believe in any religion that believes in one God, and from all different cultures and all different countries. So there's this uniqueness about it that, by its very presence, starts to wear away prejudice and superstition, which I think is extremely important. Dr. James Tresna was the ritual director for the Valley of Guthrie, Oklahoma Scottish Rite for over 20 years. That Freemasonry is a conductor that leads a man through the 2 greatest challenges to self-actualization. that being superstition and tyranny. And so maybe a little bit subtler now, but there were 6 great revolutions fought by Masons. Not that it was ever a Freemason conspiracy, but I would say just that I love individual traditions. Like I was seriously thinking about becoming a monk at certain points in my life, and I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a Buddhist monk, Hindu yogi, or a Catholic monk. And I just, Freemasonry reminds me that there's something profound and unique about the eclecticism of it that helps me get to my truth a lot more efficiently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something I've experienced as well, right? Independent of, I guess the sentiment amongst the wisdom traditions is, pretty much all paths go to the same place, right? There is a certain kind of awareness and understanding you get to, and however you get there is in some ways a function of preferences more than anything else. When you look at the craft itself from a structural component, from a sort of a mechanical component or an operative component, what do you think about that is a differentiator relative to the other traditions that you're kind of explored?
That's a good question. I sometimes, for the sake of honesty and virtue, I'm not always sure that Freemasonry within itself is an actual path, rather than the building, so to speak, that allows men freedom to choose their own path. Maybe it shows us introductions of wisdom tradition, match the symbols if they mean that meaning to you. And they will mean different things to different people. And so I do believe Freemasonry is a direct path to enlightenment. But like if you ever see like a modern tattoo of enlightenment, people will get very elaborate wiggly lines. It's never really if Freemasonry, like the other wisdom traditions, are a path to enlightenment, I would say the map is all over the place because humans are very complicated. How it differentiates is that I think in one respect, because of its eclecticism, sometimes it could be experienced as extremely watered down. But on the other hand, I think that its ability to have such a wide range of influences that if you really truly desire this path, if you really truly want to find out who you really are and what you're capable of, then I think you have a greater ability than all the other traditions because of it's almost like what happened to me is like when I started to like really, really dive into different religious traditions from the point of view of pursuing enlightenment, Hinduism, Buddhism, the Christian monastic path. It was almost like I needed to look at and know many religions before I started to see the commonality of it. And it started to verify and confirm for me certain important stages on the path. And so Freemasonry is unique, that it embraces all of them. I mean, for the sake of failing at human language being extremely poor representatives of the truth, one can say that Freemasonry, it's so hard to find the words, but if the highest truth is something similar to this, and don't take this as written and etched in stone, the words themselves to describe it, but if the ultimate truth is that we're all one in God, then how can any one of these traditions be so fiercely closed-minded to think they're the only path and that they don't acknowledge the wisdom in the other path? We're all one. How can we exclude other people and other traditions? And so Freemasonry does not, except for it draws the line at believing in God, the immortality of the soul.
The symbolism of the craft in a lot of ways, I've attempted in kind of numerous occasions myself to make sense of of what that path looks like. And I think one of the defining attributes of the craft is, in a lot of ways, it's just this big grab bag of symbolism, of sort of axiomatic statements that you can look at from multiple angles and get to a similar or more meaningful outcome. With that in mind, and the fact that there is not really a strong linearity to it, there's a progression through the degrees, but not a linear path per se. How do you reconcile that against the other traditions that you've experienced that may have a much more like, here's where you start on the game board, as it were, and here's how you progress through the major milestones?
Well, maybe we should begin with an honest statement that says that there is no tradition, even though the time-honored ones that have thousands of years of time-honored proof that have led many, and in some cases, many, many humans to full, complete enlightenment. We should start off by saying that the founders of all those traditions and religions never received enlightenment from their suggested practices. They had this experience, and they tried to use every ounce of wisdom in their whole life to try to lay out what could help other people. But so everyone else following another tradition is literally reverse engineering the experience of the founder, of the enlightened one that shed the path. But one might ask, is it possible to obtain enlightenment through the practices and suggestions laid out by the enlightened? And what I mean by that is that what I think that we don't speak about in all the paths to enlightenment is that probably most of it has to do with the nonverbal environment and experiences the individual has to go through. The psychodrama, the working out of what triggers the individual nervous system to dart away from present moment, or experiencing the deeper levels of consciousness that transcend the conscious and subconscious. The practices that are geared towards, they talk about meditation mainly, and in many cases, like in yoga, certain physical exercises, or in Qigong, they talk about meditative exercises to move the energy around, to empty out, to get rid of the repressed, blocked, subconscious and emotional wounds that reveal the source. But they rarely talk about the psychodrama of dealing with other people in a society, whether it be a monastery, in a society. And, the thing is just that people are going to piss you off. And if they don't, you're not being honest with yourself, and you're not being honest with them. So all the things around them provide so much your diet, and not just a diet, but a diet that's right for you. Like Nisargadatta, I would call him like my guru. I never met him, but reading his stuff, where I had the most profound shifts in consciousness by far than any other individual. And he smoked like 3 packs of cigarettes a day. He sold cigarettes, in India. And he ate meat, but yet he had these transcendent experiences. So to each one of us, we have to find like the right diet, the right like music, the right conversation. It's probably why Buddha came up with the Eightfold Path. It's really a result of many different conditions. And unfortunately, each person is like literally infinitely unique, and complex, and trying to weed through that. That's why, he taught many different meditation practices based on the temperament of people he was dealing with. And Jesus never really taught one at all, maybe secretly, and they lost it, or no one's telling us what he really taught. But it seems like probably the most enlightened realize that there's not one specific set of practices that are going to lead, someone to it. And so much has to happen around us. And I have seen that Freemasonry does provide all those components too. I do believe there should be some effort on inner work for the individual. I don't think anything happens without, you get what you put into it, obviously, right?
Right.
What do you think?
So, I agree. I have this this perspective, maybe I guess that's beyond looking past the current sort of lodge experience that most people have, which is maybe mostly administrative. It's mostly parsing out, funds and paying bills and things like that. That really, if it's a functioning lodge in a sort of meaningful operative context, it's really like a sangha or a prayer group or a study group of sorts, where you meet with people that have all taken an oath to be honest, to have integrity, to treat each other with care and compassion, to bring all of their best self to the table and act as mirrors for each other to help each other grow. I don't know that we have ever in the craft historically had that experience documented or codified. I know for some, they're able to form subgroups or find their tribe, as it were, inside the craft. But I don't know that we have a strong model for lodges operating at that capacity. When we start looking at this, I think in a deeper level, our mission then as practitioners, folks that have made it past certain gateways, let's say, or certain thresholds, should be responsible for cultivating those experiences so other people, as they come in, can have maybe their entry point. That for you, when you found Freemasonry as, a path, if you don't structure that experience in some way, in some capacity, understand that there's a transcendent opportunity here, or a Satori kind of experience potential through the initiatic process or what have you. We never really capitalize on Freemasonry's true potential.
I think that's crucial because, I was very taken. I was eighth grade. I was in Catholic school, and someone did a science project. So it was like oversimplified, and I was shocked because the individual was like the smartest kid in the school, and he did what it looked like a really like simple project. He literally took his project was based on dirty clothes in a basin with soap and hot water, and about like and I know that my mother used to do this. But she only had a couple of articles of clothing she wanted to wash. Doing a whole wash, she would just soak them in the sink, right? So what he determined out of this, and what this is relevant to your point, I think, is that he determined that after 12 minutes, the dirt starts going back into the material, and that there's this equilibrium, and then there's this critical mass where all of a sudden it starts going back in. So I see this as, maybe one could say, we could use the term egregore in the Western occult terminology of the mindset or the consciousness of the overall group that we're creating constantly, is that if we do not have certain individuals singing at a higher note, at a higher frequency, then will our harmony reach these higher notes and have more enlightened experiences. So we have to communicate experiences we have in a way that's relative to the brothers, and just constantly ignore the fact that maybe not everybody's into, that subject, but we still have to raise the flag, because you never know who that's going to awaken at that moment and who's going to rise to that too. And then if we could raise the whole energy of the group, that's how it works. How else are you supposed to get on? When you get on an airplane, 90% of the energy is taking off to get to that 30,000 feet or whatever cruising, altitude is. And then you're kind of sailing. But I think that in many cases, Freemasonry, it's hidden heights, but then they wind up sailing, and they don't really know that they're entering into dangerously low altitude, and have forgotten about the effort to come back up. And so sometimes I think we're victims of our own success, what we've done for society. I don't think many people understand really the influence Freemasonry has on society as a whole, as far as elevation in many different areas.
Yeah, our role as a laboratory or a workshop for creating change agents is often kind of misunderstood. It gets diminished to the sort of glad hand, backslapping, fraternal experience without the work that supports it. It's never going to elevate for most people because they get stuck in the mere social kind of vibe of it without doing the work. I think our role, though, then as practitioners has to be focused on accessibility at that point. We need to create accessible on-ramps for folks from regardless of where they are on their path. There, if you look at the work of Claire Graves, or you look at the work of like Ken Wilber, or it's the spiral dynamics, any of this kind of stuff, there are sort of milestones in human development, in social development, that we all have to experience and live through to get sort of caught up with the current day. And you can trace that developmentally against where people have grown. For example, like a tribal mindset is very, very common in high schools, right? That tribal mindset and how social groups in high schools interact is something that you grow through typically. If all things are going correctly, you grow through that. And then when you get into something like the craft, there's going to be folks that, at their own individual sort of developmental milestone, and they're going to bring some perspective to the table. And the objective there is to act as a hand up, as a model for the people that come in that maybe are at an earlier stage of development, that aren't quite ready for some of this advanced material. We still must, it's incumbent upon us, if we're ever going to raise the altitude of the organization, if we're ever going to raise that sort of vibe or the energy level, to make sure that everyone has a place to feel accepted and a path, up, or path forward, a path to the next stage of their development.
I often wonder, who's it all for? When we give ourselves and lose ourselves in the effort of trying to raise the inspiration, motivation, and enlightenment of what the real work is in not just Freemasonry, but in life.
Yeah.
And to get through this journey from birth to death and beyond, I wonder, is the service that we do, because I could get blocked up as meaning that no one's doing the work or whatever, it's going crazy. It's too many pancake breakfast, not enough, whatever, right? But I could say that probably the individual person that I serve the most, I don't like the words, placement of the word, serve the most. I would be against what I'm trying to do. But the person who benefits from my service to the craft is myself more than anyone else. I can't believe what I get out of it. And when I'm, I was in sales for most of my adult life. When I'm trying to sell to men in the craft is, look, you can't do this for you, because that defeats the purpose. You don't get the full impact. You have to truly give of yourself and expecting nothing in return. And to use Freemasonry as a vehicle to truly serve and elevate brother men that can increase the quality of their lives, their family lives, their communities, their social organizations, their companies, their country, and this world. But I wonder, in the losing of ourselves in our service to God and humanity, maybe it's all for us. There's a thing that Buddha had said. He said that, when he became enlightened, the world became enlightened. Now, when Buddha became enlightened, the whole world became enlightened? No, but yeah, it did. Because from his perspective, he realized that everything, no matter how half of it is horrible and ugly and dark, all perfect and meant to be. Everything is actually meant to be. It also reminds me, I think it's chapter 46 of Isaiah. God says, I, God, create good and I create evil. I mean, that's a bit of pill to swallow, to think that, all the ugly, all the evil, all the anger, all the rage, all the darkness in this world is God himself just to have, so that humans can have contrast, so that we can work out our souls, so we can experience sovereignty. How else are you supposed to do it? You don't go to the gym and lift 1 pound. You got to push yourself. You got to have a real challenge. And this life is a real challenge.
Absolutely. And, you point that out. I mean, it's immediately called to mind the same thing as in Dogen Zenji's work, right? Shoshaku Jushaku, the world that is perpetually out of balance and yet is in perfect balance in total. That whole idea is just sublime and profound. And I think, if I had to describe my Freemasonry in a similar context, it would be like it's an effortful surrender, where I am simultaneously bringing effort to the table and then surrendering at the same time to the work. It's this really subtle and nuanced experience that allows me to elevate my consciousness, which in turn elevates the consciousness of those around me. I mean, it's different fingers, same glove kind of thing. We're all in this together, experiencing it together. And the higher we can individually grow and evolve and advance, or whatever language you want to use, the more it elevates the people in our immediate sphere, our families and our friends, the more it elevates the community. It is in and of itself the trend from chaos to order in the form of conscious experience. And I think that, you sit down, and I hate putting labels on stuff, but you define God. That's my God there. That is the path. It's the transition from order, or from chaos to order, and back, recognizing that both are important to the process.
Yeah, because without the contrast of chaos, order would not be experienced as order, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like a Zen koan,
yep.
To say that effort and surrender. I mean, if you think about that for a second, you're surrendering to the effort, and you're putting effort, surrender, and how they are complete opposite, yet how they can be balanced and the same and need each other conceptually, kind of leads you to like this Zen koan, where reconciliation of the opposites is beyond words and concepts. And if you get it, you can't really say it because it's beyond words. It's just pure experience. Yeah, I get it. But
it's like Tao. It's like what Tao Te Ching Chapter 1, right? Like the Tao that can be expressed is not the true Tao. There's no words that you can apply to any of this that make it that can encapsulate the entirety of its powerful sort of capacity. And I think if you approach Freemasonry in many ways as a Zen koan, you begin to see that sort of flex conceptually between the elements of the craft and how they fit together and what they do. And at the same time, if you move to an operative stance with it, there's tons of stuff there too. It's not simply just like the transcendent side of the experience. It is functional and operative. When I step through the role of worshipful master into the role of senior warden as a headspace, my perspective shift is non-trivial and profound, and helps me solve a completely different type of problem in the world relative to how I'm expressing myself as a person. There's so much beautiful nuance in it that I think a lot of folks have just kind of missed with, getting attached to the logography, the logos, the simple sort of, let me put this square and compasses on my car, and that identity sort of purchase, all of the stuff that comes with that, the egoic expression, that they miss the forest for the trees in a lot of ways. There's so much just opportunity. And I think it's because the craft is so flexible in its interpretation that allows for us to go and do that effortful surrender, or that have those experiences.
I'm contemplating stealing your term operative as applied to what we're talking about, because usually when I hear the word operative, I always just think, okay, so that was just a term when we were, medieval stonemasons, and we were building, you're referring to the edification of oneself, I believe, when you use the word. So we've never left being operative. We just changed the building material.
Correct. 100%. And I think, if we're not careful with it, we let the folks, the community at large, or whatever the perspective that essentially is trying to take these symbols and turn them into something maybe that they're not. If we lose that operative component, we're actually throwing the baby out with the bathwater. When you say, "Oh, this is a speculative craft," if that doesn't inform your behavior, then what are you doing it for? Right? If it doesn't come back to.
Well, if you think about what was the purpose of pure operative stonemasonry, was to build buildings and cathedrals. Brother Winston Churchill said, "We build our houses, and our houses then build us." And what he was referring to is that the absolute, most intent of the structure of the buildings, how they were built, how they looked externally, how they were constructed, everything about it and the meaning of what happened inside the building and what should happen outside the building was for the psychological effect of individuals. So the idea of building cathedrals the way they were was literally using an ancient form of neuro-linguistic programming in architecture to change the neurology of individuals to point to something that they wanted people to see and tell them outwardly. And so, like you go into a cathedral and it's like there's this automatic, your neurology starts changing to a sense of awe, and you're looking up. Even though you're looking up in direction, it's really what's really happening is you're looking up inside yourself. Yeah. And so what the building were doing was cultivating society and trying to imbue society with the enlightened ideas in accordance with evolution of mankind. And so when the shift went from, okay, so there was the declining building Catholic cathedrals because of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment led to the recession, where people were like, enough with the dogma already. We got to kind of like open our minds. That's when the highly educated individuals and maybe specific groups or group saw the opportunity to now join operative lodges so they can discuss enlightened ideas. The political ones could get you hung for treason, discussing, representative republics or a democratic republic, or discussing meditation could get you burned at the stake for being a heretic. And so that was the place where they could talk about that stuff. So now how do you build a society now? How do you continue to contribute to indirectly influencing society to build enlightened utopia? Not, I want to retract the word utopia, but to continually inspire humanity to evolve to a higher place.
Yeah.
And so it became less about architecture in the physical form and more about the 6 great revolutions of the 17th and 18th centuries, which were all Freemasons behind the American Revolution, the French, Italy, Hungary, South America, and Mexico. I mean, never did anyone raise their hands and let's, in a lodge and say, let's overthrow the government. But Freemasonry was cultivating men that at certain periods of time at the right moment would dedicate their energy to going against what was then a corrupt government and to try to bring freedom to humanity, politically and spiritually. I mean, this is a fact. You can't really deny it. Pretty profound.
Yeah. I think it's important to recognize that the government was the expression of what is effectively a stuck worldview, right? I don't know that the governments that we were through in these revolutions was the defining thing. It was more an artifact, and it speaks to the craft in a lot of ways as well. The social experience we have is emergent from the individuals in that experience. This is why the single greatest investment you could make in improving the world around you is to improve yourself, because the entire experience is emergent from the individuals in that organization, in that group, whatever. If you are the person in your family who has advanced the most in terms of, developmental progress, understanding, awareness, et cetera, compassion, you're going to bring up everyone around you, right? We spoke about this already. That same sort of function. I mean, we are this change agent. Whether you need to believe that that's an organized, functional thing that's happening behind closed doors is irrelevant. What really does happen when individuals focus on elevating their own consciousness is they bring up the people around them. And that's the function of the craft. When we look at this, we are builders of consciousness. We are builders and designers of our own individual consciousness and create these better outcomes by removing the barriers to our, achieving the next level of understanding, the next tier of awareness, whatever that might be. When you look at this sort of broadly, I think a lot of guys just miss the entire thing because you think, well, the operative work is the operative work, the speculative work is the speculative work, and that in the process of deepening my understanding of the speculative space, maybe that's where I'll figure it out. And the answer is no. You have to, it's like a Zen koan. You have to do both sides of that work. You have to bring it all the way back full circle. You can't have a one-sided coin.
I think what you mentioned is extremely important and very crucial. Where what I think that you were referring to is that we're going to miss a very, very important opportunity if we judge, well, that government was corrupt, and just stay there, right? That government was a result of the yin arm of the yin and yang in that culture. It was leading to complacency, and so when we make statements like the Catholic Church was repressive, or the English government was repressive, or they need to overthrow that. I think what's happening is we kind of start developing animosity and judgment based off of organizations, and we declare like, what is the church? What is that government? But when you start looking at it closely, like with the work with Ken Wilber, really, what is the definitive lines of what a group is? I mean, if you want to get back to the core ideas, what really is the boundaries and limitations of myself? How do I define myself? Where do I end and the universe begin? And if you honestly look with common sense and attention, you cannot find the boundaries of where you end and the universe begins. This is the whole Enlightenment path, about realizing that, even to say we're all one, are just words to be used. But it's a good expression once you have the experience. And then after that, it starts hardening into a belief, and it just goes back into the memory banks and becomes data, and stuff. But yes, if we judge countries, governments, religions, or religious leaders, or any other individual on almost like any level, we're missing the opportunity to do the work in ourselves and see that all that evil is contained within me also. And I'm trying to work on throwing that off. What happens is when we say, well, I often get into this discussion, you have people, there's these entities, right, that are trying to control, hide this secret that we're talking about. And to me, that's all clickbait for YouTube to get a person to watch the video. The truth is, this stuff has never been hidden, always been there. For instance, the Catholic Church.
And you could find it in you.
You find it in you. But if you look at the Catholic Church about the whole teaching that we are one with God and we're one with each other, has never been hidden. I could draw up a list of like 20 different mystics that have written hundreds of books on this stuff. You could go, when you go to seminary, right, there's a whole course in Roman Catholicism, Catholic mystical theology, where you think you're studying Buddhism or yoga, And so it's really never been hidden. It's just that, people's minds do not go through the tough work, right? You want to, on Facebook, you're going to see people, posting pictures of their lunch and their shoes, they're not going to talk about the real work. No one wants to do the real work. I want to do the real work. I experienced enough pain in my life for not doing the work, and realize it's much harder to not do the work than it is to do the work. You experience more pain, And so for me, it's really been pain has been my motivator, But I think it's right. If we start like declaring like corrupt things that helped our evolution, we don't also take the opportunity to say, hey, by the way, whatever they were, we have within us, and we have to work it out. Like, I am as guilty as Judas. I am also as glorious as the Christ. We have to recognize both.
Yeah, 100%. And this is really one of the profound kind of gifts of getting to a certain point in your development where you can understand that because governments are emergent, because societies are emergent from the essential center of gravity, as Ken Wilber uses the phrase, right? That center of gravity of development from the culture, that because they're emergent, it's real easy to want to grab onto that and give it a label and then extrovert it, right? That's not part of me anymore. That's the reason the world is the way it is. It's their fault.
Right.
When in fact, that's someone who's, that is the artifact of a bunch or some percentage of the population stuck at a level of development. For example, right? I've many times sat and tried to figure out what is this greed thing that everyone kind of has in them. And the further you trace that, the easier it becomes, right? When you start looking at greed as an idea, you immediately get to that's just manifest fear. Greed is manifest fear. Someone who's afraid that they're not going to be able to get their needs met then begins acquiring more than they need in fear of losing.
And that to me is the esoteric meaning of the symbolism of the myth of the Adam and Eve, the birth of the ego, self-awareness, eating of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil.
You look at the exact, the Hiramic legend itself speaks directly to fear as a primary motivator. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the three ruffians, right? These are the reasons why people get killed. This kind of understanding, it's all in there. It's all in there, and it's waiting
it's all
for
in
you.
there.
Yeah.
It reminds me of I think it was the last episode of season 2 of Mandalorian. When he captures Moff Gideon and he goes to give the dark saber to Bo-Katan, and she needs that saber to bring all the Mandalorians back to Mandalore and usher the whole form of glory into it. And she's looking at him; she can't take the saber. And so Moff Gideon, the baddest guy in the galaxy, tells the most highest truth. By the way, interesting side note. And he says, "You don't understand. She has to win it in battle." So Mando mocks it and goes, "Just take it." They're like, "Here, I yield," like yielding. And Moff Gideon says, "No, you don't understand. The saber doesn't have power. The story does."
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all the allegories in Freemasonry, all the stories in the Bible, all the stories in every religion and culture, all of a sudden just makes sense. It's conveying a truth. People get stuck, right? People get stuck on the historical validity, but the historical validity has little to do with the mythological truth. It's trying to express a psychological truth that's more pristine than an entry in a history book, And I think that's one of the major problems that Freemasonry has a solution to, is that I think it's human nature that people want to use that subjective experience as subjective proof of their beliefs. And that just doesn't work. If you pay close attention to it, it's just not going to work. Well, I know I did this affirmation and I got this job. Well, that might be true for you, but who knows really if that was the result of it, So yeah, I get it. That gives you faith to move on in a positive direction. And that's what it's meant for. We're all groping in a house full of mirrors and trying to grope through the dark. So if it helps you motivate in the right direction, that's what its purpose, not to hold on to it like a hammer to beat someone over the head with,
Yeah.
Sorry for the tangent.
No. It's super easy to get lost in this. And then when you add on to that, right, that we each other in the work itself have this transmissive potential as well, where you can not only deliver the experience, but elevate that experience through transmission by being fully present in the moment at those, while in the ritual. There is just so much going on that is easy to dismiss by focusing on, hyper-focusing on the details as opposed to essentially swimming in the river. There's so much good stuff there. Michael, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been awesome. Time has just vanished completely. Being present and sitting here with you has been just a delight. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Brian. May I say one last thing?
Please.
So when I came to Masonry, I was looking for truth and hopefully find a different version of it that I couldn't find in books on Hinduism and Buddhism. And so when I started to make these discoveries that were lighting up my mind and my soul, my heart and my spirit, being a salesman, I immediately started to ask if I could teach it. And so whenever I found it, I was talking about in the collation room before and after a meeting, engaging on the telephone with brothers and asking if I could a little talk on what I just learned. And it changed the environment of my entire district. I feel like it wasn't me. It was the light I received that I wanted to pass on. Take it that it was me. I'm the guy that all of a sudden woke up esoteric and deeper philosophical and maybe more purposeful meaning in the craft in my district. Well, then I lose, right? But if I say, look, I found something valuable and I want to share it with everybody, it's the light that puts away the darkness. And so that's what I would say to everybody is don't just sit on your hands and sit back and fold your legs and cross your arms and say, entertain me. You know, you got to compete with Netflix, present, remark, be a leader, initiate. Who the hell wants to live a life of just, they didn't tell me, no one told me, no one showed me. God gave you a mind, the most precious gift in the entire universe. Figure it out, work it out, contribute, serve. The person you save may be yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Have a wonderful day.